Hi guys, it's me again. I'm gonna show you a little bit about glazing now. So glazing is a technique that comes from oil painting, and it's a way. It was used in oil painting because it's a way of getting a very thin layer of color over top of painting in thin layers. And since oil paint takes a long time to dry, painting in thin layers allowed those layers to dry more quickly. So it's been used for hundreds of years. And you might not know it to look at it because it's often sort of very subtle. But with acrylic paint, it can be used for a variety of different things. Sometimes just to shift a color, sometimes to warm something up, sometimes to add a shadow. There's a lot of, sometimes if something's kind of a little boring, you might find that just adding a little glaze of another color on top can really make it feel a little richer. So some of you have, I don't have it in the correct bottle, but some of you have this glazing medium. And what it is it's basically sort of like paint without any color in it. It's the base. It's a very specific base because it's very fluid and it's a little bit glossy and it looks sort of creamy white in the bottle. And if you don't have this, you can approximate glazing with just water, and I'm going to show you that too, okay? So what I first want to just show you is we talked a little bit about the idea, whoops, here we go, oh, I got to tilt this down, sorry. Okay, we talked a little bit about the idea that different paints have different transparency qualities. So I have here a blue, which is not that transparent, and I'm going to paint it on top of this sheet of paper, just so you can see, like, it's a little transparent, but it's not wildly transparent. I have here a blue that's transparent but is very dark, and actually it's still, you can see, it's covering up those letters quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glazing medium and I'm going to use that. I'm going to make a dollop here and a dollop here so you can see. And I'm going to use that I'm going to mix my color into that, and I'm going to start with the one that's, lighter. And how much? Well, that is the key. It just depends. You can mix a lot of glazing medium and very little pigment, and I'm going to show you this right here, right now. So that is a lot of glazing medium and not too much pigment. It's very, very, very transparent. You can mix a little bit more pigment. Basically what you're doing is you're spreading out those particles. Let's see if I've made enough of a transition. You're spreading out those particles so that you're adding transparency without compromising the paint and the binder. So you can see there that the original is relatively opaque, I've got one there that's super transparent, and I've got one there that's a little bit transparent. Now I want you to see what happens when I do this with the dark one here, because I'm going to just add a little bit here, and I'm going to take it so that it's a lot of transparency. And let's see, I've got to do this on the table, sorry, but I'll hold it up here in a sec. And you can really see what a difference that makes in terms of transparency. So that takes that color that's very dark, and it basically kind of keeps the color, but it spreads the pigments out so that it's much more transparent, translucent. So now, how would you want to use this? Well, I want to just show you this painting here. Originally was a black and white painting of two bananas. This is a student painting that got left, and of course I butchered it. So what it kind of looked like, you see all that black and white in there? The whole painting was just black and white. And in playing around with it, what I've done is I've added a very translucent layer of blue to this banana, and then a not quite as translucent layer of blue to this banana. I also went over the black background and I made it reddish here, so that would look just like this. And then the base, also which was black and white, I added kind of a brownish color to it. Now, I was just doing this as a sample. There's not that much logic to what I'm doing. But what I want to do is I want to show you another one, and we're going to paint on top of this here in a second. So this also was a black and white painting. And this object here looked like these two objects here, right? Completely sort of like very gray. And what I've done in here is I've taken that relatively boring object, and I've beefed it up by just, it still has the lights and the darks that were already there, but I've beefed it up by just adding a lot of color. And I realize it's a little patchwork and crazy, but just to give you a sense of what that does. And so if I was doing this, I might choose, and I'm going to try and do this while holding it up, I might choose to come in here, say, sorry, I've got to turn this around so I can do it, and come in on this bottle down here and just, whoops, start to create a sense of blue shadow down here. This is a little hard to do while I'm holding it up, but you'll get the idea. And I can just, again, and I can do this in layers. I could do a very light layer, and then I could do a darker layer. I could do a light layer and then let it dry and then do another layer. And what I'm trying to do, and I'm wiping off my brush, is then I'm trying to just have it sort of, you know, kind of feather out a little bit here. Okay, so it's not an abrupt transition in that way. Okay, so all of a sudden now, my little bottle, let me hold it back right side up, actually now has a slight blue tint down below, right? And you can see that it starts to feel almost like a little bit of shading. And if I could just reach another brush, I can do the same thing by taking some of my medium and bringing a little bit of yellow in here, right? So now I've made that a little transparent. I usually, before I go on to my painting, if I'm not sure how transparent I've just made that, I almost always take a sheet of paper with some writing and I just go over top of that and check and see, is that about the layer of transparency I want? And we'll use that for now. And what I'm going to show you is now, let's say in the top, I want to have a sense of sort of lightening up here. So, you know, I'm just going to bring this in, again, a little hard to do while I'm holding it up, but you'll get the sense. Just going to bring this in up here, and what you can see, and I'm going to go over top of that blue edge a little bit. So hopefully what you can see here is that there's a certain kind of like glowing up towards the top and a certain kind of shading that's happening down towards the bottom. So that's, it can be very subtle like that, or it can be, you know, a little wilder and crazier like that. And just to let you know, this is one that the entire painting was blue and white when I started, and each of these is basically a layer of thinned out glazed color that I've loaded over top of. So these eggs were all blue and white, and I've kind of gone in there and gotten a little crazy. You can get beautiful, you know, if you have a blue underneath, whatever is underneath has to be dry. So you can get, if you put red on top of blue, you can get this amazing purples. You can really have fun mixing color that way. Now, if you don't have glazing medium, you can still do this. It's a little less of a perfect system, but you can still do this just by adding water. But one thing you want to do is you want to make sure that your water is really clean. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little, not as much of a puddle as I did when I was doing that wet on wet, but I'm going to go ahead and really make a little bit of puddly color here. And again, if I want to know what it looks like, I am going to just go ahead and put it onto a piece of paper to see what that is. So this is a little watery, and I can take that, and let's just take this painting here, which is of a piece of paper. Oh my gosh, do you remember this? And I can take that, and so actually I got to put this flat so it doesn't go flying across. And I can come along here, and I can paint this in. The thing about using water is you might not get quite as even of a coating on it. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting it on, and then I'm actually going and drying my brush a little bit so I don't have quite as much water, because I actually want to also hold this up for you in a second. One of the things you can see about this is that you can still see that little rip in there. So I'm not covering up what's already painted so much as I'm just tinting it. And let me just go in here, and I'm going to keep going over top so you can also see this line here. Let's see if we can, I'm going to do a whole piece of this. And that's a little bit dark, so I might have used less pigment, that might have been better, but I'm also just going to come in here and I'm going to pull some of that paint off. Okay. So, and again, if you get something and you're doing something like this and it just seems like, oh wow, that's just way more than I wanted in terms of color, you can always, sorry, hard to do while I'm talking. You can always, so you can see that there. You can still see the underneath structure. But if that's wet like that, and I'm using water, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's just too severe, I can also take a little bit of paper towel and just pull some of that color off. And what I might do is I might take, so that left a little bit of a texture on there, and I might take this and just now go back in and kind of smooth that out a little bit. So I'm not, if I don't like that texture, so I'm not looking at as much of the texture. So what you can see here is that I can still see the underneath all the painting, the lights and the darks that show the paper. But what I've done is I've added a kind of a blue tint to it. So, and I find this really helpful. If you have a painting that just is kind of like really, some of it's boring, this is a really quick, cheap, easy way to actually enliven a painting that's sort of feels a little dead. So that's it for glazing. Give it a shot, and I'll talk to you soon.